Picture this. You wake up. It is 50,000 years before right now. The air hitting your face is so cold it physically burns the inside of your lungs. There is no thermostat to turn up. There is no heated blanket to pull over your head. Outside the cave or the rock shelter where you are sitting, the wind is howling across a frozen, unforgiving landscape. You are a human being. Genetically, you are virtually identical to the person sitting on the couch watching a screen right now. Which means, underneath the grime and the smoke of the fire, you are basically a tropical ape. You have no thick fur coat like a bear. You have no dense layer of insulating blubber like a seal. You are soft, vulnerable, and completely unprepared for a world made of ice. But you have a dead deer, or maybe a reindeer, or a wolf, and you know that if you do not somehow get the skin off that animal and onto your own body, you are going to die. So you do what anyone would do. You take a sharp piece of flint, you peel the hide off the animal, you throw it over your shoulders, and you are saved. Right? Wrong. And this is exactly where almost everyone gets the history of our species completely backward. But here is the question nobody actually asks. How do you get from a raw, bloody animal skin to a soft, warm, wearable piece of clothing? Not as in, did they wear hides? Obviously, they did. We have all seen the caveman cartoons. We are not talking about the aesthetic. We are talking about the sheer, brutal mechanics. What if I told you that an untreated animal skin is quite literally a ticking time bomb of rot? What if I told you that turning it into a jacket required a level of chemical engineering that borders on modern magic? And what if we are wrong, and our ancestors weren't just slapping dirty furs on their backs, but were actually the first true textile engineers, sacrificing their own living bodies to manufacture the very concept of a winter coat? And this is the rabbit hole we are going down today. Buckle up, because the story of how you got the shirt on your back is about to get incredibly weird, deeply brilliant, and honestly, a little bit horrifying. Let's start at the very beginning. What happens when you just pull a skin off an animal and try to wear it? Let's start with the most obvious thing, the physics of raw flesh. When you skin an animal, you are not holding a blanket, you are holding an organ. Skin is biological tissue. It is loaded with water, blood, fat, and muscle fibers. If you just take a raw hide and wrap it around yourself, one of two things is going to happen, and neither of them ends with you surviving the winter. Option 1. The hide stays wet. In the damp, relatively warmer conditions near a fire, bacteria are going to look at that wet, nutrient-rich hide and see an all-you-can-eat buffet. Within a matter of days, the skin will begin to putrefy. It will rot. It will stink to high heaven. The hair will slough off in disgusting clumps, and it will literally fall apart in your hands. You cannot wear rotting meat. Option 2. The hide dries out. If you lay that raw skin out in the freezing wind or by the fire to dry, the water evaporates. But the collagen fibers inside the skin, the proteins that make it what it is, will glue themselves together as the moisture leaves. The hide will shrink, curl up, and turn into a stiff, rock-hard board. Have you ever seen a rawhide dog chew? Imagine trying to wear a shirt made entirely out of that. It would cut into your neck, it would chafe your arms raw, and every time you tried to bend your elbows, you would be fighting against a material as rigid as plywood. You cannot hunt in plywood. You cannot sleep in it. It traps no air. It provides zero insulation because it doesn't wrap around your body, and the moment it gets wet in the snow, it turns back into a rotting, slimy mess. So here is where it gets interesting. How did a prehistoric human with no laboratory, no chemical factory, and no internet tutorials figure out how to stop the biological clock of decay and turn a stiff board of rawhide into supple, flexible, water-resistant leather? The answer is a process called tanning, and the evidence for it genuinely melts your brain. To understand this, we have to look at the tools. Archaeologists, like the researcher Ian Gilligan, who has done massive work on the thermal origins of clothing, point out that you can track the evolution of human survival not just by the weapons we made to kill animals, but by the tools we made to process their skins. And the first step of that process is violent, exhausting labor. You have to scrape the hide. You take the skin, stretch it out on the ground, and pin it down with wooden pegs. Then, you take a specialized stone tool, or a smooth bone from the rib of a deer, known as a lissoir, and you scrape. You scrape away every single microscopic ounce of fat, flesh, and membrane from the inside of the skin. If you miss even a tiny patch of fat, that patch will rot, and the whole hide is ruined. But you can't push too hard or you slice a hole right through the skin, destroying the garment. You have to do this for hours, scraping, pulling, scraping, pulling. But even a perfectly scraped hide will still dry into a stiff board. You have to somehow lubricate the collagen fibers so they don't glue together. You need an emulsified fat. You need a specific kind of oil that can penetrate deep into the microscopic structure of the skin. And where do you find that in the middle of the Ice Age? Let me throw you something even wilder. Nature, in a twisted bit of poetry, provides exactly what you need. There is an old saying among traditional hide tanners, a piece of ancestral knowledge that has been passed down for thousands of years. Every animal has exactly enough brain matter to tan its own hide. Yes, exactly that. The human brain, the deer brain, the wolf brain, they are all massive globs of specialized lipids and emulsified fats. Ancient people figured out that if you take the brain of the animal you just killed, mash it up into a paste, maybe mix it with a little warm water or liver, and vigorously rub that grey, slimy paste deep into the scraped skin, the unique fats in the brain tissue will bond with the collagen fibers. Picture yourself doing this. No gloves, no running water to wash your hands afterward. You are kneeling in the dirt, kneading cold, mashed-up brains into a raw pelt for hours. You stretch the skin, you pull it over a smooth log, you work the brain matter into every single pore until the skin is completely saturated. Then, to lock those fats in and make the whole thing water-resistant, you hang the brain-soaked hide over a smoky fire. The formaldehyde and other chemicals in the wood smoke undergo a chemical reaction with the collagen and the brain fat. It binds them permanently. It turns the skin slightly yellow or brown. It gives it that distinct campfire smell. And, most importantly, it stops the bacteria from ever eating it. You have just invented leather. You took a rotting piece of flesh and, through sheer observation and brute force, you transformed it into a durable, flexible, permanent material. Honestly, I get stuck on this fact every single time. Long before we invented agriculture, long before we built cities, we were already performing complex organic chemistry in the dirt just to stay warm. Okay, that's settled. You have a soft, brain-tanned, smoke-cured hide. Now forget everything I just said, because having a soft blanket is not the same thing as having clothes. If you just wrap a soft skin around yourself like a cape, you have a massive problem. A cape does not trap a microclimate. As soon as you move your arms, as soon as a gust of wind hits you from the side, the cold air rushes in, and the heat your body is generating gets sucked right out into the atmosphere. To survive a severe Ice Age winter, a cape is useless. You need sleeves. You need leggings. You need boots. You need a garment that closely mirrors the shape of the human body to trap a thin, permanent layer of warm air right against your skin. You need a tailored suit. And to make a tailored suit, you need to cut the leather into specific shapes, and you need to permanently attach those shapes together. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn into high technology. If I ask you to name the most important technological inventions in human history, you would probably say the wheel, or the printing press, or the microchip. But there is a tiny, fragile object that belongs right at the top of that list. And without it, humanity would have never been able to leave the warm climates of Africa and conquer the frozen north. The eyed needle. Right now, you probably have a needle sitting in a drawer somewhere in your house. It is a tiny sliver of steel with a hole at one end. It costs a fraction of a penny. But 50,000 years ago, creating a needle was an absolute masterpiece of engineering. Back in 2019, and over several decades of excavations before that, archaeologists digging in the Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia found something miraculous. Deep in the sediment, dating back around 50,000 years, they found a needle. But it wasn't made of steel. It was carved from the bone of a large bird. Think about what it takes to make this. You don't just carve a point. You have to take a splinter of bone or mammoth ivory. You have to grind it against a rock until it is perfectly cylindrical and sharp. And then, and this is the part that genuinely blows my mind, you have to drill a microscopic hole through the other end without snapping the fragile bone in half. You have to use a tiny, sharp piece of stone, spinning it back and forth, drilling halfway through one side, flipping it over, and drilling exactly through the other side until the holes meet. One wrong move, one twitch of the hand, and the needle snaps. But they did it. And once you have an eyed needle, everything changes. You can't use plant fibers for thread, they aren't strong enough and they rot. So what do you use? You look back at that dead animal. You take the long tendons from the deer's legs, the sinew. You dry the tendon out and then you pound it with a rock until it splinters into fine, indestructible, thread-like fibers. You twist those fibers together, wet them with your own saliva, thread them through the microscopic eye of your bone needle, and you begin to sew. You are no longer just surviving, you are manufacturing. You are stitching tightly fitted, enclosed garments, parkas with hoods, boots that wrap tight around the ankle, mittens. And you're about to say, come on, were they really making complex clothes, or just loosely tying a few bits of leather together? Okay, then explain this. About 30,000 years ago, in what is now Russia, near a place called Sungir, a group of ancient humans buried their dead. When archaeologists excavated these graves, they found something that completely shattered our understanding of the Stone Age. They found the skeletons of an older man and 2 children, but they weren't just buried in the dirt. Covering their bodies, lying exactly where the fabric of their clothing had long since rotted away, were thousands upon thousands of meticulously carved mammoth ivory beads. The man's clothing had around 3,000 beads sewn into it. The children had even more, over 10,000 beads between them. Let that land for a second. These weren't just random decorations. These beads were sewn into the leather in distinct lines, outlining the seams of tailored pants, fitted shirts, and jackets. It was a complete, tailored, high-tech Arctic suit, fully customized and decorated. But here is the truly staggering part. To make a single one of those mammoth ivory beads, to carve it, shape it, and drill a hole through it using nothing but stone tools takes roughly 45 minutes of concentrated labor. Multiply that by 13,000 beads. You are looking at nearly 10,000 hours of pure labor. 10,000 hours just to decorate the clothing of 3 people. This means that 30,000 years ago, humans weren't just frantically scraping hides to avoid freezing to death. They had mastered the art so completely that they had time for fashion. They had time for identity, for status, for beauty. They were creating garments that would rival the most expensive, bespoke tailored suits on Earth today. But here is the part we don't like to talk about. This beautiful image of our ancestors sitting around the fire, skillfully sewing beads and chatting, hides a brutal physical reality. We look at the bone needle. We look at the stone scraper. We admire the ingenuity, but we forget that the most important tool in the prehistoric textile industry wasn't made of stone. It wasn't made of bone. The ultimate tool was the human body, and the body paid a horrifying price. And now I have to tell you the other side of this, because this is where the story stops being a fun collection of ancient survival hacks and becomes something much heavier. Let's go back to that brain-tanned leather. Yes, the brains and the smoke stop the hide from rotting. Yes, they lubricate the fibers. But if you want to make a tightly fitted shirt, or a soft pair of leggings for a child, or water-resistant boots, scraping and tanning isn't enough. The leather is still tough. It is still rigid in places. If you try to sew it, it fights back. If you try to wear it directly against your skin, it chafes. To make the leather truly supple, to break the heavy fibers down until the skin is as soft as the fabric of the shirt you are wearing right now, you have to exert extreme mechanical force on it. You have to crush the fibers. And if your hands aren't strong enough to do it, you use the strongest muscles you have. You use your jaw. For tens of thousands of years, all the way up into modern times among traditional indigenous populations living in the extreme Arctic, the primary method for softening leather was chewing it. I want you to sit with this for a moment. I want you to physically imagine it. You take a thick piece of raw, cured animal hide. It is dirty. It is covered in microscopic grit, sand, and ash from the fire. It tastes like old fat, smoke, and dried blood. You put it in your mouth and you bite down. You clamp your teeth onto the tough leather and you pull. You chew. You move the hide an inch and you chew again. You work your way across the entire surface of the skin, crushing the fibers between your teeth, mixing it with your saliva, softening it piece by agonizing piece. You don't do this for 5 minutes. You do this for hours. You do this every single day. You do this for every pair of boots, every pair of pants, every jacket that your family needs to survive the winter. And we know exactly what this did to the people who performed this labor. When bioarchaeologists examine the skulls of Paleolithic humans, and when they look at the historical medical records of traditional Inuit women from the 19th and early 20th centuries, they see something devastating. The human mouth was used as a third hand, and the teeth tell a story of sheer destruction. In many of these skulls, the front teeth, the incisors and the canines are completely flattened. They are not just worn down a little bit, they are ground down to the gum line. The continuous, lifelong grinding of tough leather mixed with the abrasive sand and grit trapped in the hides acts like sandpaper against the enamel. Over years of chewing, the enamel is obliterated. Then the softer dentin underneath is worn away. Eventually, the wear reaches the pulp chamber. The nerve of the tooth is exposed. There are no dentists in the Ice Age. There are no antibiotics. There is no painkillers. Imagine the excruciating, blinding pain of an exposed dental nerve. Now imagine waking up the next morning, picking up a piece of tough, cold leather, putting it against that exposed nerve, and biting down again. Because if you don't, the boots don't get made. And if the boots don't get made, your husband or your child loses their toes to frostbite or dies in the snow. This labor was heavily gendered. In almost all observed hunter-gatherer societies in extreme cold climates, the bulk of this hide processing and chewing fell to the women, mothers, grandmothers, sisters. They literally ground their own bodies to dust to create the protective second skin that allowed humanity to survive. The pain must have been a constant, thrumming background noise of life. The exposed roots led to massive dental abscesses, infections in the jawbone. Many of these women likely died from septicemia, blood poisoning, originating directly from the dental infections caused by chewing leather. They sacrificed their teeth, their jaws, and sometimes their lives to manufacture warmth. We talk about the discovery of fire as the thing that saved humanity. We talk about the invention of the spear, but a spear only gets you the meat. A fire only warms you as long as you stay right next to it. To leave the fire, to walk out into the frozen wasteland and actually conquer the planet, required clothing. And that clothing was paid for in bone, in nerve endings, and in quiet, invisible suffering. This changes everything, doesn't it? When we look back at our ancestors, we so often reduce them to grunting cavemen or simple creatures stumbling through the dark. But they were not simple. They were caught in an absolute crucible of survival. Every single day was a negotiation with death, and their currency was their own flesh. And yet, out of that crucible, they didn't just survive, they created. They figured out the complex organic chemistry of lipid emulsions in brain matter. They deduced how to use aldehydes in smoke to lock the proteins in skin. They invented the bone needle, a piece of microengineering so perfect that the steel needles we use today are exactly the same shape. They created tailoring, they created art and fashion and thousands of ivory beads just to make the heavy burden of survival look beautiful. We don't know the names of the people who first figured this out. We don't know the name of the woman who first realized that if she chewed the leather, her child wouldn't freeze. That knowledge was passed down from hand to hand, from mouth to mouth, across hundreds of generations, across thousands of miles of ice and tundra. It is an unbroken chain of human endurance, and that chain connects directly to you. Every time you learn a new skill, every time you invent a workaround to a problem, you are firing the exact same neurons that a Paleolithic human fired when they stared at a raw hide and thought, "I can make this work." The tools have changed, but the mind is the same. The capacity for endurance is the same. The fierce, desperate love that makes a person endure excruciating pain just to keep their family safe. That is the exact same. The honest answer is, we will never know the full extent of what they endured. Science can examine the worn-down teeth and describe the mechanism of the abscess, but it cannot crawl inside the experience itself. It cannot measure the bone-deep exhaustion of a long winter night in a cave, the ache in the jaw, the smell of the smoke. We can only look at the evidence and feel a profound, quiet awe. We sit here today at the top of the technological mountain. We have fabrics woven by machines, insulated with synthetic aerogels, perfectly waterproofed and effortlessly warm. But all of it, every single thread of our modern comfort, is built on the foundation of their sacrifice. They broke their own bodies so that human history could continue. So let's go back to where we started. You wake up. It is a cold morning. You are in your house, the thermostat is ticking gently in the background, and you are getting ready to go outside. You open the closet. You reach out, and you pull your winter jacket off the hanger. You slip your arms into the sleeves. You pull the zipper up to your chin. You feel the immediate comforting trap of warm air against your body. It's just a piece of fabric. It's just an ordinary, everyday object that you bought at a store and never thought twice about. But now you know the weight of what it represents. You know the 50,000 years of genius, chemistry, and blood that had to happen just so you could walk out the door and not feel the cold. You know what's behind the seams. Look at your favorite heavy coat, run your fingers over the stitching, and tell me in the comments, do you think you possess that same ancient, unbreakable endurance somewhere inside you? Could you have chewed the leather? I read these. If you love looking at the ordinary things around you and suddenly seeing the massive, beautiful, terrifying history hidden inside them, hit subscribe and join us. There is always another rabbit hole waiting. Until next time, stay warm.